It's go time.
Welcome to the Third Down Gamble podcast with your hosts, Don Charbin and Heath Graham.
Welcome back to the podcast, and Heath, it seems like there's never a dull moment as we just found out, well, relative to us, a major trade, a couple of major signings, and also a couple of major releases. Let's go right away to what happened with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers and the Ottawa RedBlacks. Talk us into that.
It's an exciting moment when we get some breaking news. This broke basically about an hour before we hit record on this podcast tonight. Dru Brown, quarterback of the Ottawa RedBlacks, has been traded to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Back where he started his CFL career, he was in Winnipeg for 3 seasons. The RedBlacks gain a first and second round draft pick. They give up Dru Brown and a second round pick that was originally traded to Ottawa by Winnipeg in order to move up in the 2026 draft. So that draft pick comes back. Dru Brown returns to Winnipeg. A big quarterback shakeup in Ottawa.
And there's a conditional second round pick as well. And I'm sure it has something to do with playing time, if Brown is actually seeing the field or not. It wasn't anything that surprises me. And you know that I've been talking to you off air a lot, that I thought Dru Brown would probably before Labor Day wind up back in Winnipeg. He would be in the office saying, if you're not going to play me, trade me. He's not that type of person. It was a lot of conjecture on my part, obviously, but I kind of felt if you're Dru Brown, the writing's on the wall. You know that Ryan Dinwiddie has put you out to pasture. Just move on, go somewhere. And we were trying to speculate where would be a good fit. And we sort of thought maybe Winnipeg, but then, of course, you've got Taylor Elgersma there. What does that mean to that quarterback room?
Bryce Perkins, of course, is the other quarterback of note in Winnipeg as well. There are some things to play out. Either it's the departure of Perkins or the movement of him to the practice roster, or Taylor Elgersma could be essentially the equivalent of what they do in NCAA of redshirting, where they retain his rights. He can practice with the team but can't dress for the games, but they still retain his services. I don't know exactly where this plays out. It's something to watch. And Perkins had established himself as the short yardage quarterback to some success so far through 2 games in Winnipeg. I don't know exactly what it means, but I'm curious to see where this goes. I don't imagine the Bombers are giving up on Taylor Elgersma at this point either, but I believe the organization had a lot of comfort with Dru Brown in the lineup when he was with the Bombers previously. He did step in well for an injured Zach Collaros, led the team to some success, was the odd man out because of Collaros' return for a couple more seasons. They seemed to be grooming him towards that number 1 job in Winnipeg. Collaros decided to come back. They weren't going to say no to that, which is why Dru Brown ended up in Ottawa for the last couple of seasons.
I do wonder about Elgersma and how he looks at this situation. Given what he's tried to do in the last couple of years and then what he finally settled on doing, being in Winnipeg with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, redshirting I don't think would be very helpful to him. He needs playing time. He needs time on the field. I know in a redshirt situation, this is kind of a euphemism. It's not really that, but you get paid even though you're not dressed for a night. They can do that with 2 players. You get game day checks, which I thought was a smart move. But if you do that to Elgersma, okay, you practice all week and then you go into civvies on game night. I don't know if you're doing him a world of good. So I think it's going to be Perkins is going to be the one that's going to be the odd person out. He's going to be the one that probably is scratching his head going, I just saw somebody else leave for the same reason. Is this going to be me now?
That's a good point. I think when it all falls into place, Perkins is the odd man out. I believe the CFL terminology would be to put Elgersma on the reserved list. So he would still get to practice and collect his full salary. He just can't dress for the games. I agree with you 100%. The best thing for Elgersma right now is to be dressed on the sidelines, watching that game action. Maybe they look at him as their short yardage quarterback. He's certainly got the size for it. Get him some action that way, but not going down the path of being the long-term solution on short yardage, but certainly to gain some playing experience this year.
Well, why don't you make Andrew Harris your short yardage person? Why not have him line up behind the center?
Because Andrew Harris is the running backs coach for the Saskatchewan Roughriders.
Yeah, so why not bring him back and do that? No, I'm just kidding. Let's go with Brady Oliveira. If you can get him trained up, because you've seen a couple of other teams do the exact same thing, where they've got a big back and that person is responsible for getting you the third down yardage that you need. Why not take Brady and say, get over there with the center, let's practice some snaps and figure out how to read a line from the quarterback position, not necessarily from the backfield.
We know that neither one of us are a fan of the specialty short yardage quarterback in this league. We've been quite vocal about it. The Bombers have some options there. Brady Oliveira would be a great one. Chris Ike is listed as a fullback. Dante Daniels listed as their tight end. Those are some massive guys that you could see, similar to Ante Milanovic-Litre has been used in that same role for a couple of teams now, being comfortable taking those short yardage snaps and running forward. I think the Bombers have some great options there as well. I'm just saying, if you're going to keep Elgersma on the roster, this would be a way to get him into the mix. Not necessarily a fan of it. I think there's other short yardage players that would be more than capable of getting you that yard or two.
The other thing you could do is go back to a conventional set. Have Collaros stay in because he wants to stay in. He doesn't like the fact that quarterbacks get yanked. The starting quarterback gets yanked for a third down gamble all the time. Have Oliveira and Chris Ike in the backfield and let the defense figure out what you're going to do. That's the way it was up until maybe 10 years ago. And I think Wally Buono was the one who really pushed the change. And of course, like ducks to water, everybody else follows suit. But I want to get back more into that quarterback room, because where does Dru Brown fit in this? I'm looking at his career trajectory, and if you think of places to land, Winnipeg is logical because he's been there before, but is it a situation where Zach Collaros retires and then Brown becomes a starter, or does Elgersma become the starter, or what do you do with Perkins? In Winnipeg, I think you've created a little bit of a melee in a sense, not in a violent way, but in a very, what's my role here? What am I going to be? What are they thinking of doing with me? And where does this lead? There's now questions if you're not Zach Collaros.
It is a bit reminiscent, although now we're talking about current second and third string quarterbacks versus starters. But when Nathan Rourke returned to the BC Lions with Vernon Adams at the helm, it did create some chaos in that room. I think for this season, we know Zach Collaros is the anointed number one. They're going to roll with it. I think Dru Brown fits back into that quarterback room quite seamlessly. He's familiar with the head coach, the organization, a different offensive coordinator, but a lot of familiar faces around him as well. So I don't see that being as big of an issue. It's more than rumored at this point that 2026 is the final season for Zach Collaros. So you're right, it does start to raise questions as to 2027 and beyond, who the quarterback of note is for the Blue Bombers. And there's a lot of things to play out. And we know in the CFL, it's rare for a quarterback to start and finish all 18 games in a season. We're likely to see at least one or two of these other guys hit the field for some significant snaps. And I think that will go a long way in determining what happens in 2027.
2027, that's a year away still. I want to know what happens for the remaining 15 games or 16 games that the Blue Bombers have to play this year. What happens in that room? Now, Dru Brown is not an agitator. He's not the type of guy that's going to go in and say, hey, everybody, I'm here. Guess what? That's not his style at all. He's very quiet. He's laid back. He's very congenial. I don't see him being a disruptive force, but the fact that they brought him in is.
It is. I agree. And we'll see where it goes. I picked the Bombers to finish 9-9 this season. We can talk about predictions here a little bit later on as well. I don't think that bringing Dru Brown in blows things up, although I think the biggest disappointment has to be Bryce Perkins feeling like he's going to be the odd man out. Again, it remains to be seen what happens, but that's the likeliest of scenarios. Now let's flip to the Ottawa RedBlacks. They came into this year having 2 seasons of Dru Brown as their number one guy. Ryan Dinwiddie came in as head coach, general manager. Jake Maier signed as a free agent. Before the season even started, he anointed Maier as his number one guy. I was listening to the Ottawa radio broadcast this past weekend. Saturday was that triple header. I was doing some stuff out in the yard. Had radio broadcasts of all 3 games going on throughout the day. The RedBlacks radio crew and fans were calling for Dru Brown to be inserted into that game. Ryan Dinwiddie has now eliminated that headache moving forward, but there's rumors of somebody coming in to fill those shoes.
Well, there's more than rumors now because it's McLeod Bethel-Thompson that has been signed by the Ottawa RedBlacks. That is a familiarity that goes back to their days in Toronto, where McLeod Bethel-Thompson technically led the Argos to a Grey Cup victory, although he didn't finish the game. He gets credit for the win. It was Chad Kelly who made a name for himself in that fourth quarter. I almost thought maybe at some point that they would try to trade for Chad Kelly and bring that team back together. With Ottawa, Max Duggan has also been released. So they're clearing house. They are making way for a new regime in there. The fact that fans wanted Dru Brown is usually a great way for a head coach to look around and go, I've got a problem here. I either accede to this or I get rid of the problem. And the best way to do that is to ship him right out of town. Now, people can be very upset with Dinwiddie and what he did. That may reflect in ticket sales for the short term unless Maier finds a way to become a real strong force at quarterback. Can't pick on him so much for what he did against Toronto, but we'll get into that when we talk more about other things. The RedBlacks, to me, right now are sort of in this mini freefall. They are struggling to get an identity. They are struggling to figure out what they want from that position. Like him or not, Ryan Dinwiddie is a smart guy, but sometimes he tends to overthink things. And maybe this is one of those times where he gets caught out. It won't be long lasting. He's willing to readdress issues. But in the interim, I think Ottawa is kind of going to be having a bumpy ride.
I agree. I think this is a step back for Ottawa. McLeod Bethel-Thompson wasn't in a CFL camp this season. He's coming in cold now into week 4 of the season, 2 weeks of preseason games missed, training camps missed. He's not going to be up to game speed, I would imagine, for a couple of weeks. He's learning a new offense. Yes, he's worked with Ryan Dinwiddie in the past, but it's reacquainting himself as well. If Jake Maier continues to struggle, I don't know what this season looks like for the Ottawa RedBlacks. Bethel-Thompson can certainly put up big numbers. We've seen him have success as a quarterback in the past. I wasn't sure that there was much desire on his part to come back this season either, but I think that connection with Ryan Dinwiddie coaxed him back to the CFL to help put a Band-Aid on what's bleeding out of the Ottawa RedBlacks.
Now, the RedBlacks also been active free agent-wise. They signed Nicholas Vadiato, who was from Middle Tennessee. He's going to be in the Ottawa dressing room now. He's going to be another body that they're going to take a look at to see if he's got the tools and can understand the game. As I said, there's going to be some hiccups right now because Ottawa is sort of spinning. And notwithstanding that they've lost 2 games and didn't look good for many parts of those 2 games, when you make changes as radical as this, and you think back to Chris Jones and what he did in Saskatchewan, what he did later in Edmonton, when you have these multitude of changes, things are going to fall in places that you don't anticipate, and that's what's happening right now at the quarterback spot. And what Dinwiddie did not like about Dru Brown, I don't quite understand. He never categorically came out and said when he was signed that Dru Brown was never going to be a starting quarterback for him, but he kind of hinted that there was a lot to his game that needed fixing.
He did, and you're right. There's obviously a bit of a disconnect there. We'll never know the full story behind it. Even when Jake Maier signed this year, I wasn't sold on him being the number 1 guy. I thought he was a capable number 2. We saw that with Grey Cup winning Saskatchewan Roughriders team last year. For what we saw of Jake Maier, I mean, we didn't see him on the field a lot. He to me was that kind of consummate second guy that could step in, not make a lot of big mistakes, almost, dare I say, a game manager type quarterback to keep you in it, but he wasn't going to blow the doors off. Right now, Ottawa, after what we've seen from the first 2 games this season, need to figure out how to blow some doors off.
Oh, doors. More than that, they've got to find a way to get into the end zone. And their defense will be fine. William Fields will be fine. That'll sort itself out. But I just look at Jake Maier and his overall stats. I mean, he's just not going to make you go, wow, that's the type of guy I want leading me. 86 games played since 2021 when he got the job in Calgary. He's thrown for 12,786 yards, which is very respectable, but his average is 7.7. That's low. And that tells me, and we know from statistics that have come from the CFL in the last couple of years, he led the league in passes completed behind the line of scrimmage.
I'm not 100% sure that we don't see McLeod Bethel-Thompson by about week 6. I think looking at this roster, there are some fantastic receivers in that core right now. Jake Maier's not the guy to push that ball down the field. Justin Hardy seems to be ageless and keeps producing. Aiden Eberhardt came in. He's looked really good this season. He seems to be connecting well with Jake Maier right now, but Geno Lewis has been underutilized. Keelan White, Khalil Pimpleton, both explosive players when targeted enough times in a game. And right now, we're just not seeing that success. So I believe that the pieces other than quarterback are kind of there. Greg Bell is a capable running back as well. Daniel Adeboboye has shown some promise this year. As I said, they were calling for Dru Brown, the fans and the broadcast team, for a reason. And we just haven't seen any kind of productivity out of Jake Maier so far.
Jake Maier can throw deep, but he doesn't throw deep off script. In other words, when a play is breaking down, he has to scramble out of the pocket to make time to find a receiver. He doesn't look down first. When Chad Kelly does it, he's the exact opposite. He looks down the field and then looks short. And why does Chad Kelly throw so many 50-yard touchdown passes? For that reason alone. He looks deep. He's got David Ungerer, who goes down the field, realizes when his quarterback's in trouble, and takes off and gives him a target. And how many times has he hit him on those types of plays already in this season?
This is Andrew Hoskins of the Turf District Podcast, and you're listening to the Third Down Gamble Pod.
Shifting gears now, Edmonton Elks president Chris Morris has had some big statements about the disaster of the name change affecting the attendance for the Elks. And he didn't also mention kind of coming out of COVID, there's a few other factors into it, not winning home games as well. But what is your take on calling this the name change a disaster?
The name change was not a disaster. If you go back to 2021, or even 2020, it was the middle of COVID that the name change was coming, and there was a tremendous amount of pressure from all kinds of groups, notwithstanding Edmonton season ticket holders, that said that this old name had to go because it had connotations that just were terrible, not from play on the field. And it was a term that was used loosely to describe a group of people that had nothing to do with them. This goes back to the way people, and especially Europeans, came across and just sort of branded things. They had to change the name. They went to a name that they had 100 years before. Totally makes sense. And I think the response was positive. 15,000 people responded with name change possibilities. They wrote in. They wanted to see what was out there. And Elks won. It was by far of any other name out there. It was ahead. So to say that that was a disaster, don't think so. I think what really happened, you go 25-63 since you've had the name change. That's winning 29% of your games, and you lose 22 in a row. Now tell me Does that matter more, or does a name change matter more? It's like me saying I can't win at CFL Fantasy because I changed the password I used to get into it.
Chris Morris has a lot of history with the previous Double E name. He's won multiple Grey Cups as part of that organization. There's obviously some attachment for him. I get it, but using that as, calling it a disaster and using that as the excuse of why season ticket sales have plummeted, I think is taking the cheap way out. Yes, there are some people still mad about the name change that refuse to go to games. How many that is, I don't believe it's a lot. We've both been to games in Edmonton over the last couple of seasons as well. We see the passion of the fans that are in the stands. There is a very strong core of fans in Edmonton cheering on the Elks, and winning will draw these people back. Changing the name back, which isn't going to happen anyway, but I don't believe that was going to help fill the stands. You're looking at now attracting a newer audience. The branding for the Elks, I thought, was great. They've got a really neat logo. Their Indigenous logo also is one of the best ones in the CFL. There's a lot of positives about the Elks, and a 2-0 start this season will go a long way in getting more people back into the stands. We'll see where they are at the end of the season. If they're in that playoff picture, then I think you're going to see a bump in season tickets again starting next season.
It could happen as this season continues if that team starts winning. But walk through what happened. And you look back at Chris Bresson, who was at the beginning of this. Then Victor Cui came in. He had a lot of neat ideas, but it didn't jive with the brass at the time. Rick Lawlisher comes in as a caretaker. Chris Morris is the next one in line. In the middle of that, you got general managers. You got Brock Sunderland, who leaves in 2021. You got Chris Jones, who's there for 3 years. G. Roy Simon is an interim, and now finally Ed Hervey comes here. So you got a ton of turnover. And let's not forget the coaching staff. So Jason Moss gets fired at the end of 2019. Scott Milanovic comes, never coaches a game, and he leaves. Jamie Elizondo had an absolute disaster of a season with the Elks. And then Chris Jones comes in, blows everything up, and guess what? He's gone too. What? Like, what are you trying to prove? And what are you saying to your marketing team? This was brought to my attention by someone I trust. What are you saying to your marketing team? That this whole branding thing is just stupid? Like, what are they doing? Like, they're doing everything they can to make this a positive experience, and then you come out with that?
I think about Larry Thompson and his desire to take over the team as well. And I know he is, we want to talk people that had the connection to the previous name. He's been a season ticket holder for many, many years as well. But even he wasn't calling this name change a disaster. He was rolling with now being the owner of the Edmonton Elks. Yes, there was some bringing back of some of the old traditions as well, but he was on board with the Elks name. And I believe he had some of that direction from the league that a reversion back to the old name wasn't going to happen. He was accepting of it. I just don't understand why the team president currently is even stirring this up at this point.
Well, it's specious logic to blame a name change for the fact that you can't win on the football field. It doesn't make any sense. It's like I said, I changed my password to CFL Fantasy. Now I can't win at CFL Fantasy. Well, what's one got to do with the other? Nothing. The only constant is me, the person that's in charge. And that's his job. His job is to be the best Chris Morris that he can be and lead this team with positive feeling and guide them with a direction that they're going. Not worry about name changes and what happened 5 years ago, stuff that happened before he got there. He did him a disservice. And if I'm Deb Thompson, I'm not too happy about this. That's my product that you just dissed. And I maybe like this Edmonton Elks name. And I'm getting somewhere. And you're starting to see a generation. They're young yet, but they're starting to see a generation that's starting to get into football that don't know this team by any other name. Let's get with it, people. Instead of whining about what didn't happen and using some stupid logic that the name change had something to do with it, fix what you can. Bring in quality people, bring in quality players, and win some football games.
The team in Ottawa has had 3 different names since the 90s, and they have really embraced the RedBlacks name. I don't think there's anybody there pining for the Renegades or the 2-word Roughriders to return either. They've developed a following, they've developed a culture, game time activities, everything centers around being the RedBlacks and that lumberjack theme. It's going very well there. And a similar path, we want to talk about teams not performing on the field. The RedBlacks and the Elks over the past couple of seasons have been duking it out at the bottom of the standings. Yes, attendance has dipped a bit in Ottawa as well, and we've just kind of talked about what's going on there, but I don't see the same issues with the name. They want a better product on the field.
Exactly. Ottawa doesn't go running around saying, well, if we'd have been the Roughriders, we were going to be okay. Now, they were never going to get the Roughriders again because Saskatchewan said, ixnay, that's not happening. We were side by side for 90 years. That's it. We're done. Ottawa had to come up with a new name. They went with the Renegades in the interim. That Gleiberman experiment didn't work out. They come back with a different ownership group who are very invested in Ottawa. They come up with RedBlacks playing on the lumberjacking that went on in the Rideau area along the canal and everything. And that's a huge history in that area, the red and the black. Brilliant. And they move forward. They didn't look back. They moved forward. Now, for Edmonton, yeah, okay, you want to not deny what you were because you were the city of champions. That under that old name, that team was very successful. But you don't go back and say, well, wah, 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 if we hadn't changed the name, we would have been okay. No, you say, wasn't that wonderful? Let's do it again.
The preseason Grey Cup favorite BC Lions are 0-2 with a lot of issues on defense right now. Is defensive coordinator Mike Benevides in trouble?
Ooh, there's a great question. I would say so. Now, Sione Tahame has been released, defensive lineman. They just made that move. I'm not so sure about this BC line defense. There was a lot of talk, even when he was in Edmonton, that he was too passive and the way he did things. Now, against Saskatchewan in the game in Regina, we heard that lovely cover zero word again, which, of course, Montreal was very happy with in the Grey Cup against Winnipeg. Well, he did that a couple times when the Riders were near the goal line and the Roughriders scored touchdowns. Cover zero near your goal line is not good. You go into a zone or you have a safety move around back there and help out whoever may break free. But you do not leave your halfbacks and your corners one-on-one all over the field because basically everybody knows you run to the center and the quarterback finds you.
The fact that the BC Lions are 0-2 this season, I'd say is a bit of a surprise, but not shocking. If you look at the teams they played against so far, they lost on the road against the Grey Cup champion Saskatchewan Roughriders. They lost on the road in Hamilton against Bo Levi Mitchell and an explosive Hamilton Tiger Cats team. But I think the way they lost that game against Hamilton is what speaks volumes. The receiving core was decimated with injury. Nathan Rourke struggled to have receivers that he was familiar with on the field, let alone comfortable with. So the offense struggled. When that happens, your defense needs to step up. They did not in this one. They got embarrassed by the Hamilton Tiger Cats.
BC is second last in points allowed. Guess who's last?
Ottawa.
Exactly. And why? Because their defense is in trouble. Now, partly it's because of the offense. Look at the situation that the BC Lions find themselves in. I mean, they are not stopping teams from scoring. Now, Hamilton did a number on them in very few plays. They stretched that defensive secondary to the nth degree and tore them apart. BC is second in opponents' first downs allowed, but yet second last in points allowed. So that tells you that they're giving up big plays.
They are. You look at the line. Bo Levi Mitchell in this game, in which Hamilton scored 41 points, only threw 18 passes. He completed 15 of those for a total of 285 yards and 5 touchdowns. So he was averaging almost 16 yards per completion. We know we kind of set that benchmark at about 10 yards per completion is a decent showing. Bo Levi Mitchell blew that out of the water. He didn't have to do much because he would just take the snap, bomb it down the field, and they're first and goal.
Well, and then Kenny Lawler, I mean, it has been conjectured around the league, wondered what kind of effect he's having on this team. I kept arguing. It's not the fact that he catches the ball. It's also the fact that defense has to focus on him. Guess what he did? He went out and scored a fantastic touchdown in this football game. Had a great stats night. 15 passes, 5 touchdowns. Not a bad ratio.
No, that's pretty good. Those QBR quarterback ratings have to be blown up with what Bo Levi Mitchell did in this one.
Again, with QBR, I hate touchdown passes. What if your guy throws a 108-yard pass and the receiver gets tackled at the 1? You bring in your third down and they score. Seriously? Come on. Like, touchdown passes to me are facetious. What matters is offensive touchdowns. If that offense is getting touchdowns, I don't care how they do it, if it's a running play or a passing play. That's that quarterback still in charge.
It is, and you look at the stats. Myron Mitchell had only one catch for 56 yards, didn't get a touchdown. That's exactly what you're talking about. It was a bomb to get them into scoring position. So a great one catch for Myron Mitchell puts them right into the scoring range, and they punch it in for a touchdown.
Now, some people have been ragging on Nathan Rourke as a result of that football game because the BC Lions didn't put up great numbers. But as you pointed out, what were they down? They were down starting receivers. In fact, only 2 started the game that had played the previous week. And one of those, Kieran Prasant, gets wiped out with a block early in the football game. And now you're down to 1 receiver that's a starter. Pretty tough to get some chemistry going with guys that really haven't played out there. Now, a couple guys made a great account for themselves, but again, in garbage time.
They did, but when you're down Javon Cotoy, now on the 6-game injured list, Stanley Berryhill, now on the 6-game list, Seven McGee, now on the 6-game injured list, Keon Hatcher, we don't know exactly his stature yet. Apparently he was kind of close to being a questionable game time decision, wasn't able to go in that one. Those are some pretty big pieces of that offense, and guys that Nathan Rourke has a lot of faith in that are not available to him. I don't think you can pin this one on Nathan Rourke. He did the best he could given the circumstances, but they were badly outgunned in this one.
It's akin to going out for a university football game. You get wiped out with your starting receiving core, and you have to reach into the high school crowd to see who is available. And I'm not picking on these receivers, but they just haven't had the playing time. For Nathan Rourke, do you trust that they're going to be where they're supposed to be? Because they haven't run the reps. Do they understand every play? Because they haven't run the reps. They just don't know implicitly, where you've got other guys like Hatcher and Berryhill. They've done this for a couple of years with this team. They know exactly when this play is called, I've got to be right here.
Rourke still had 291 yards and a touchdown. He put up some decent numbers. His average was a bit lower, but again, the defense needs to win you those games in that situation. How often have we seen teams where the defense steps up and goes, you know what, we've got some adversity here, we're not going to let them score? Montreal's defense has been dominant the last couple of seasons. Winnipeg's defense, Matt Nichols at the helm as quarterback, wasn't going to blow people away. They won a game last year with Chris Strevler completing 3 of 8 passes because the defense stepped up and won you that game.
Well, Troy Volvel had something to say about it too in Ottawa.
He certainly did. But that's another point of it, is your special teams. You need to win 2 out of 3 of the offense, defense, and special teams to really be successful in this league. BC didn't show up really in any of them. And the bottom line is the score kind of isn't indicative of how this game went. They scored a couple of touchdowns late when it was already out of reach.
And that was with Chase Bryce coming out and with Hamilton basically playing a very soft defense because they knew they had the game won. I always wonder about that, and this is just between you and me, but why do teams let off the throttle at the end? Why do you want to have anybody score a touchdown on you? They had blanked them. They had left them with nothing but field goals up to that point. Isn't there a point of pride over this? Don't you want to stop them and say, no, not tonight. You're not scoring a touchdown.
You do. I think it takes away a little bit being that they're not in the same division, because those points for and against matter so much in a division game. So against an Eastern team, maybe not as important to really hammer down, but especially in this era of the balanced schedule where you're playing everybody twice and then a couple of add-on games to get you to your 18, those point differentials matter. I agree with you. I think it's like the accusation of running up the score on somebody. You know what? It's a professional sport. You don't want them to score, you stop them. There's no such thing as running up the score in a football game.
Well, Toronto at the end of the game kicked a field goal against the RedBlacks on the last play of the game. And Dinwiddie was asked afterwards, well, what did you think about that? He said, well, there's still time on the clock. Mike Miller's a good guy. What do I do? If I don't want it, I stop it. I don't let them get that close. I don't turn the ball over at that point. This is never on the team that scores. It's always about the team that doesn't or allows it.
Ottawa, Toronto do play 3 times this year, so that point differential doesn't come into play as much. But I agree with Coach Dinwiddie on this one. There's time on the clock. You do what you can. And if they're in field goal range, why would they take a knee? I can see if you're on your own 30-yard line, time's running down, the game's in hand, there's no point pushing the ball down the field. But when you're in scoring range, go for the points.
You talk about Ottawa playing Toronto 3 times. Well, Ottawa and Montreal are going to see a lot of each other before the end of August. They've got 3 games against each other. So Ottawa, if you want to make any hay, you're going to have to do it against your divisional opponents. And for Montreal and Toronto, if you take care of Ottawa, well, that's going to boost your probability of making the playoffs.
Third down.
Kicking off the week 4 of the CFL season has the most exciting player in the CFL, Justin Rankin, and the Edmonton Elks headed to Winnipeg to take on the Blue Bombers. The home team Bombers are a 2.5-point favorite in this one. Just doing some projections over the rest of the season. If Justin Rankin stays on the pace he is on, we're looking at 3,834 yards from scrimmage and 27 touchdowns.
Wow. Can any mortal keep up that pace? That's amazing. The Blue Bombers, coming out of a bye, are 16-3 since 2018. And the Elks, last played on Saturday. It's a Thursday night game. In CFL terms, this is a short week.
I will take the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in this one. I find it rare that they lose back-to-back home games and coming out of the bye. The reason I like Winnipeg in this one, they've had some questions on defense, as we've seen over their first 2 games this season as well. Other than Justin Rankin, there isn't a lot on that Elks offense that is really, really scary. They need to contain Rankin, bring that average down to a normal level of yards, and I think they can have some success there. I don't know that the Bombers really blow them out either, though. I wouldn't be surprised to see Winnipeg win, but Edmonton to beat the spread.
The CFL has averaged over 60 points a game, especially this last weekend. Now, overtime's helped that. But over 60 points a game this season. This is one of those games where I think the score is actually going to be less just because of the 2 teams involved. I'm going to pick the Elks on the road. Short week. Justin Rankin may be being covered because they've got other weapons. They've got Austin Mack, somebody who does know how to beat the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. He did it a lot of times with Montreal. And Winnipeg's secondary is suspect. Reddick Ramsey is still learning the safety position. I don't know that he's up there yet with his understanding of what he needs to do. That'll create some holes. Edmonton does have some depth at receiver. They're coming into the game relatively healthy. Of course, their offensive line took a bit of a hit, but Winnipeg hasn't been scaring people with their defensive line either. I like the Elks. I think they're confident and they're ready and they're primed. And this is maybe a little bit of payback to the Blue Bombers. They may not win the game, but I'm still going to pick them to get inside that 2.5.
I think this could be the game of the week. Looking at the matchup, I think that, again, Winnipeg coming out of the bye, Zach Collaros has looked comfortable this year. Cody Fajardo showed a lot of grit in that overtime win against Montreal last week as well. He's got a lot of confidence. This one should be a good one.
It should be. Edmonton overall for scoring is 6th. The Bombers are 7th. In terms of defense, the Bombers are middling again. Edmonton is just above them. Overall, Edmonton, most likely because they have the 2 wins and they have one that was a bit bigger margin, does kind of give them a little bit of a boost in terms of stats. But I just think that Mark Killam has got this team figuring out how to win, and when that happens, watch out.
Game 2 of the week, the Saskatchewan Roughriders travel to Regina to take on the home team Toronto Argonauts. Yes, you heard that correct. This is one of the displaced home games for the Argos. They will be the home team at Mosaic Stadium. I guess the odds makers are giving them that home field advantage, as the Argos are a 3.5-point favorite.
The Roughriders, you're right. They've come back from Calgary after an overtime win, and we had 2 back-to-back overtime games in the CFL on Saturday. We've had 3 so far this year. I think we've averaged 1 in the previous 3 with a 0 in 2022. Why are we getting so many overtime games?
This is the parity that we've been talking about. I think this is one of the closest matched CFL seasons that we've had. There's a couple of outliers there maybe, and Ottawa might slide down the standings a little bit, get blown out in a few games, but I think a lot of these teams match up very well, and we're going to see a lot of close games.
Is there anything to what I've been jumping up and down about, and that is the change in the interpretation of how the single is awarded, and the fact that a ball lands in the field of play and rolls out the corner of the end zone and no point is awarded? We saw Edmonton against Montreal. That very thing happened. If a point is scored by the Alouettes because Javon Leake has to pick up that ball, then that game maybe doesn't go to overtime. You take out singles, you're taking out ways to score. That means you get 7s and 3s. Well, they line up pretty quickly at 21. Go on from there.
For as much as people hated the walk-off Rouge deciding the game by a single point, there's a lot of times that a point scored in the first or second quarter where somebody conceded on a kick return that ended up affecting the outcome of the game and the decision making.
Go back to the Grey Cup last year where the Saskatchewan kicked a ball into the end zone. The Alouettes gave it the single. And guess what? The Alouettes were 8 points down on that critical fumble.
Exactly. They needed the 2-point convert to tie the game up. It does come into play, and sometimes it's the difference between a field goal tying and all of a sudden you're down by 4 and you need that touchdown because you conceded on the second drive of the game. You conceded that single. I agree with you. I hate watching the ball bounce on the 5-yard line, roll out past the pylon, and all of a sudden the ball comes out at the 40 with no point. I don't know how many weeks we'll keep harping on this issue. I think we've made our opinions quite clear, but you're right. It does affect and drive games to be tied later on.
Did we see a team respond to that problem in the Saskatchewan Roughriders? Remember, at the end of the first half in Calgary, they try a field goal, the wind picks it up, throws it sideways, and Tariq McAllister goes all the way back on a missed field goal for a touchdown. This may be the last one we ever see, because in the new way that they're interpreting how the field is going to be laid out, I don't think we're going to see wide field goals ever again be returned for touchdowns. Maybe blocked field goals, but not wide field goals. So Tariq McAllister may have an interesting stat. But the Riders, next time down, roughly the same distance, said, we are not trying a field goal because minimally they get it to 40. Maximally, they could be running it all the way back. We are going to go in and see what we can do on 3rd and 8, and they got the first down and went down and scored.
Getting back to this game, as mentioned, the Argonauts are a 3.5-point favorite. A little bit surprising that Chad Kelly wasn't pulled in the last game for concussion protocol. He took a pretty good whack on a sack, and surprisingly, he seemed a little bit shaky getting up, and surprisingly, he wasn't pulled off the field 2 weeks in a row now. I know the previous podcast we talked about Davis Alexander bouncing his head off the turf as well. Is this a bit of a concern for player safety that the spotters aren't catching these and taking proper precautions?
I would say it is, but we know there's going to be a tremendous backlash over this if Chad Kelly misses a series and the Argonauts lose the football game. Players want to play, and they are going to disguise this, as I mentioned last week, any way possible. Now, Kelly on the play, yes, he certainly looked a little disheveled, but was he concussed? I don't know. It's hard to tell when players get hit like this what is happening completely. The spotters, they have to make a lot of interpretations. I don't know how many of them are medical doctors, how many of them have been trained in head trauma. That is a tough decision to take. And for Toronto, Chad Kelly does not want to leave the field, especially what he's been through the last 2 years. Could they have? Yes. Would they have? Maybe. Should they have? Oh, boy, tough question.
4 interceptions, and the bulk of them came after that hit.
That's true, but was it a case of him not feeling right, or was it Ottawa figuring out where that ball was going? Because even Mike Miller in the postgame said, we got to be a little bit more careful about how repetitive we run something, because eventually Ottawa started to jump routes because they knew the ball was going there.
Predictions in this game. I do like the visiting Saskatchewan Roughriders at their home field. I'm going to take the Riders, and they will beat that 3.5. Well, I guess they're going to win. So the spread doesn't matter. Roughriders are winning this one outright.
Toronto, and they're going to become road warriors very quickly because they are away from BMO for the duration of that other tournament that's going on. If Toronto gets off to a good start, and Chad Kelly, to me, is getting very close to the Chad Kelly we saw that led that team to 16-2. If he finds that form, and he's got the receiving core to do it with, although Kevin Mattel may be questionable for this game, and the Argonauts, they're going to press that Saskatchewan secondary. You can move any secondary into mistakes if you have the types of receivers that the Argonauts do. I'm going to take Argonauts to cover. It's weird to think that the road home thing is maybe playing into this. At 3.5, Toronto is going to put up 40 points. Saskatchewan, can they do the same? That's the question. And the Roughriders are going to introduce their Prairie Blizzard uniforms. Again, the numbers will disappear. Why is it that teams do not want fans in the stands and commentators in the booth to see their numbers? You know what's important? The names in the back end of the jerseys are highly contrasted. You can read them from anywhere.
Talking about that Roughrider secondary, Nelson Lacombo out, Roland Milligan is on the 6-game injured list as well. So those are some big hits in that backfield for the Saskatchewan Roughriders on defense.
Jackson Ford has played that position. He's playing it right now. He's not a problem back there. He's with veterans. The bigger question is, with that Milligan injury, is that they lost another player. They lost Juju Hughes with a non-contact injury against the Calgary Stampeders. They're going to be hurting at that spot. Will Toronto go after it? Absolutely. They're not dumb. It's going to be a fun game. I think it's going to be an aerial circus. I'm totally expecting that Chad Kelly is going to test that Saskatchewan secondary. Marcus Sales on one side, and he's got a veteran in Tavon Campbell on the other side. They're going to be tested. This is going to be a fun game to watch. As much as you're looking forward to the Edmonton-Winnipeg game, I'm looking forward to this one.
Game 3 of the week, the Calgary Stampeders head to BC to take on the Lions. The home team is a 1.5-point favorite. We talked a bit about the loss of receiving core for the BC Lions. Can they bounce back?
A home game, yes, but they're in Kelowna for the next 2 weeks. This is the first of two, Calgary, and then the following weekend it's Edmonton. Those games were sold out the moment they announced them, which is great. And it's going to be great for Kelowna to have this, and it's really going to connect the Lions further into that province. They are probably the best team next to Saskatchewan, I would say, at making the rounds in the province and getting the players out to meet and greet. They are fantastic at it. The Lions, I think, are in big trouble. Not so much on offense, but they're going to meet a Calgary team, and if Laurent Armalade is finally back in that lineup, that defensive line is going to be scary, and BC's going to have a fit trying to figure this out. James Butler may not be playing, then what do you do? And it's starting to add up. Their weapons around Nathan Rourke are falling away into the infirmary. You can't go out there with second stringers and expect the same result. They'll get there, but that's the problem. They're getting there. I like the Stampeders. I think the Stamps are ready to win this one.
I like Calgary in this one as well. You talk about Flo or Malade, whether he dresses or not. Even if he doesn't, Jalen Hutchings is back. Clarence Hicks on that defensive line as well. They're going to be a problem for that BC Lions offensive line.
But you bring in Faloran Armalade, and that's a double team, and immediately Hutchings and Hicks are now one-on-one against whomever.
100%. I think, like I said, even without Armalade, I think that's a menacing defensive line. You bring him in, and it exasperates the problem for the BC Lions. if James Butler is hampered with injury as well, we went through some of those receivers that are on the 6-game injured list. There's not a lot of weapons there for Nathan Rourke. He can't do it all on his own. I take the Stampeders, and this one, I think 1.5 point favorites is generous to the BC Lions. I don't think they should be the favorite at all, frankly.
And then the woes on defense for the BC Lions. Now, Darnell Sankey has been everything they've asked of him. He is flying all over the field. He's making tackles everywhere. But they are struggling with that defensive line. They're not getting the pressure that they need. We saw what they did with Sione Tahema. BC just needs something up front that's going to scare people. If they don't get any pressure on this Calgary quarterback, Vernon Adams Jr., eventually is going to figure this out, and watch out. He likes to throw it deep too.
Closing out the week, the much maligned Ottawa RedBlacks travel to Montreal to take on the Alouettes. Davis Alexander suffered his first regular season loss as a starting quarterback last week, be it in overtime. The Alouettes are an 8.5 point favorite at home against Ottawa. This is the biggest spread we've seen so far this season. Is it legit?
Absolutely, it's legit. Ottawa, their defense, as I say, it's going to be fine. It's going to get together. They'll sort it out. Their offense under Jake Mayer, is Ottawa going to put up 30 points in a game? That's what I want to know, because that's what you're going to have to do to beat the Alouettes. Unless Davis Alexander is sitting on a golf cart, you're not going to scare him. I think in a way he was just thrilled that streak was over. He lost the Grey Cup. That really bothered him. Now he's got a game that's lost in the regular season. He doesn't have to think about this anymore. Bo Levi Mitchell's streak of 14 straight is still intact for a consecutive winning streak. Davis Alexander, 13 from the beginning of a career. That may never be touched. What I liked about Montreal and Edmonton was that when the chips were down and they were struggling, they found a way to get back at the Elks and force overtime. I did not like, though, when they were down deep and they had about 25 seconds left on the clock, that they settled for the field goal and overtime play. Why didn't you, if you're the Alouettes, try something to get into the end zone? Win the game outright in 60. Why are you settling on a chance that is overtime?
Ask whether Ottawa can score 30 points in a game. To do that, they're going to need a lot better performance from special teams as well. Khalil Pimpleton made a terrible decision as a returner late in the first half. It was inside the 3-minute warning. There was about 2.5 minutes left in the second quarter, I believe. A punt goes into the end zone, and Pimpleton tries to run it out and gets tackled at the 3. We've already talked about this. If the ball's dead, it comes out to the 40. If you concede a single, it comes out to the 40. What was he thinking trying to run that one out, given that situation, as opposed to great starting field position at the 40 just by taking a knee or watching it roll out?
Well, I think it goes against every instinct that he has to let that ball just sit there. And I don't know how Javon Leake in Edmonton has been able to allow himself to just stand there and watch a ball trickle past his feet and then squirt out 1 yard deep in the end zone. Maybe Pimpleton thought that the ball would roll out the side of the end zone. It didn't. He knows now that it's going to be a point. Maybe he's under instructions, don't give up the point. I don't know. When that ball is just resting there and you've got a host of defenders surrounding you, chances are give up the single is a safe way to go.
It did result in 7 points for Toronto. Ottawa failed to move the ball. They had to kick it away. Chad Kelly led the Argos down the field for a score. It was a direct result of this. If had the ball been at the 40 and they 2-and-out, they're kicking it down to the other team's 10-yard line, and it's a lot longer field inside 3 minutes to march down for the score.
I like the Alouettes in this one, unless there's a hurricane or some crazy wind comes up on the last play of the game to change the fortunes of a team. Oh, gee, did that happen? Winnipeg at Montreal at the end of a season one year? As much as I like Ottawa's defense, I think the Alouettes are just that much better.
I agree with you on this one as well. We have a lot of similar picks this week. I think we're feeling the same way in a few games here. Montreal, it's not going to matter if that gale force wind comes up in the last minute when they're trying to punt the ball away. They're going to be up by 16 points at that point in the game. It won't matter. Montreal big.
Third Down Gamble uses the expert resources of the Canadian Football League and 3 Down Nation. For up-to-date, insightful statistics and analysis, please visit cfl.ca and 3downnation.com. The CFL on CBC theme music is used with written permission from the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation.
Thank you for listening to our show. Third Down Gamble is hosted on Podbean. Follow us on Twitter, where our handle is @ThirdDownGamble. Join us again next time. The Third Down Gamble Podcast. Audio worth watching.